Adele?
Mhm. Hello, hello. Good afternoon and good morning for the ones from the US. Today, I'm really pleased to have with us Luis Flores and Maria Paz Gonzalez that will present information about the logistics and the regulatory requirements for shipping food products to the US market. So you know all that exporting to the US is something very important, and you need to get the right information to access the market, and logistics is something very important. So Luis, I give you the floor. Your mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Walid. And it's very nice to say hi to everyone out there. I'm sure we met, even if briefly, in New York last June. I want to just let you know that our original presenter had to deal with a very sad family emergency, but we got a better deal at the end because we have his supervisor with us today, with more years of experience and a much broader um, breadth of experience, including some sourcing from some African countries. I give you Dr. Gonzalez, Maria Paz Gonzalez, who has more than 20 years in the food industry and more than 15 years in the ingredients and fragrance industries, spice and fragrance industries, sourcing from over 30 countries all over the world. And you will find the first slides of the presentation quite standard, just to make sure all corners are covered. But when we get to the nitty gritty, I hope that this will inspire some questions in you concerning your own experiences, and feel more than free to fill them. I believe you can type them in the chat, or I'll let that to our technology consultant. But I am thankful for her time and disposition. And Dr. Gonzalez, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis and Walid. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you. I hope that what I have to say will be useful for you. I want to say, don't be discouraged. It's a process, and sometimes can be a little bit overwhelming, but it's not impossible. So please, if you have any questions at the end, please let me know. So do you have the presentation ready? I don't know how to do this. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. So thank you for what you said, Luis. But what is more important is that I've been working in the industry, and it is very interesting to see what can happen when you're trying to ship. Right now, for example, I was telling Walid at the moment, we're experiencing the possibility of a strike on all the ports in the East Coast. So that will bring a lot of problems, because if you have product in the water, it's already going to be stuck at the port until it can be undone. There's a lot of congestion going on in the West Coast ports. You know that, for example, there are issues on the Suez Canal, creating a lot of congestion as well in other areas. The Panama Canal is also experiencing a lot of issues. So right now, the ocean freight is a challenge. So it's a very interesting time to start talking about it. So we're going to try to talk about the regulations that are important in the U.S. market, and understanding the U.S. logistics and the regulatories that are required. So please, if you have any questions, put it on the chat, or we can try to, at the end, we can try to solve those questions. So I don't know if Luis, you're going to help me on this one. I don't know how big is the size of the food market and the major input categories. But the US is one of the most interesting markets, because you can find food from all over the world. There are specialty stores, or in the regular stores. Nowadays, you can find Asian cuisine, you can find Latin American products, but African products, they are limited. We don't see that many products in the regular stores. We have to go to a specialty store to find those products. Luis, can you help me here with the size and the scope?
This is our third seminar in a series, and
Okay.
We have touched on the size of the market
Okay.
for the different categories of products that we are addressing. But to put it bluntly, it's in the billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars. And as you well said, for African market share is very small. But let's not forget, we're also fighting against Mexico as a formidable competitor. The rest of Latin America, being in similar latitudes to Africa, also competes with a broad range of high quality products. We believe there is an opportunity for specific ingredients and finished products from Africa because of the rising market share of the diaspora markets and the transition of many of our most successful products into the mainstream markets. If you bring some sardines from Morocco, nobody's looking at where it comes from. If it's good quality, we consume sardines, we're going to buy it. So for us, there is the goal of penetrating diaspora-oriented markets. But for other products, there is the ambition of breaking into that barrier of sticking outside the diaspora markets and pick up market share, competing against Latin America as well as other formidable Asian suppliers to the U.S. market and Canada, I should mention.
Actually, you said something very important, and it's like country of origin. Sometimes we feel it's nostalgic, and you can enter the nostalgic markets. And yes, you're looking for products that remind you of home, or remind you of a trip, or remind you, or anything that it's regarding nostalgic. But in the day-to-day, we have in this business of food, we need to compete. And that's one of the hardest parts when we are in this business. I don't buy food per se. I am an essential oil and spice buyer. And it is very interesting. And I do buy something from Morocco and the same product from Tunisia. And it's just depending on the price, which one I buy and which one I don't buy, because the product is the same. And at the end, it doesn't really matter if it's from Tunisia or if it's from Morocco. It's all based on quality and the price. So that's very important to have in mind, that yes, we can enter a very niche market that is the nostalgia or the home markets, but we need to really think of the mass markets that we can reach. We have to, in the regulatory bodies, we have the FDA, the USDA, and the customs border. This is very important for every product that we are trying to bring in, because we need to be registered with the FDA. We need to follow all the phytosanitary certificates, especially when we're dealing with fresh produce or spices, and we have to be compliant with the customs and borders. So if you can go to the next slide. So the Food Safety and the Modernization Act, FSMA, it's going to impact everybody, not only the supplier, but also the buyer. Because now the buyer, it is responsible for anything that is importing. So meaning that if I am bringing something from Africa, I am responsible for that product. And I have to comply with FSVP, meaning that I have to go and audit the company. So if there's anything wrong with the product, I am the ultimate responsible. And the audits can be done by third parties or by the companies themselves. And that will depend on the size of the companies that they are buying our products. If you can go to the next slide. The labeling requirements and the packaging, that's even more complicated, because in Europe, we have a different set of nutrition facts, but the US is very strict on how it's doing. There's an example to the right, and it has to be done. We can go through 3-4 hours on dedicating only on how to do the nutrition facts. This is something that it has to be done in a lab, and then this is just the reporting on how it has to be done. So any product that is going to hit the shelf has to have the mandatory labeling elements like nutrition facts, the allergens, and the country of origin. Those 3 things are by law. So we need to keep in mind all those things when we are designing the packaging. There are a lot of size requirements, bold requirements, and font requirements. So we can go in another course if you want about it. On the import documentation, you have to work with commercial invoice, the bill of lading. That it's something that you don't have to do it yourself. This will be managed and produced by the steam line that you're going to choose. The certification of origin that is going to be made by your country. The prior notice. This is something very important, because when we're sending something for food consumption, it has to be between 24 hours of loading the boat. We have to file an FDA prior notice. If we fail to do that, we will have to pay some fines, and they can go up to $10,000 to $100,000 per fine. And then we will have, if it's like raw products or spices, it will have to go to phytosanitary, organic certifications if needed, all those things. Regulatory is becoming a burden, but also a necessary evil. In my line of work, we have almost 22 different documentation that we need before buying anything. We need to have all this documentation for the product. Sorry. If you have any other there. On the customs procedures, we have harmonized tariff schedule. This is something online. You can go to the HTS website, and you can type you say, for example, sardines, you were saying sardines, you put sardines and it will give you a list of all the sardines. Is it in oil? Then it takes this tariff. Is it on water? In water, it's this tariff. Is it dry? It depends on how you go into, if it's this size of package or this other size of package. So those are the tariff schedule. With Africa, I haven't heard that there is a huge tariff schedule. We're having concerns right now, for example, from China, and that could be a positive side for Africa because you will be able to compete because now you don't have this harmonized tariff schedule. Governments are right now having discussions about having harmonized tariffs as well with India. So there's another advantage of Africa. Duty rates and taxes, well, it depends on the products as well, but I don't believe there's any taxes and rates with food from Africa at this moment. The custom clearance, it comes to the port, you have file for the FDA, and then you get in line in the customs. The customs go through, they check the paper, they can go and check the container, open the container, and once it's clear, you have less than 12 hours to pick it up. It has to be picked up in less than 12 hours. If not, you're also paying for a fine. And the types are formal and informal. The formal is where you have all the paperwork done. The informal is when you're bringing like samples and things that you are sending to in a smaller quantities. Something that is very important for you to know is the Incoterms. These are the new Incoterms from 2020. That's what they are right now. You need to be able to negotiate those before you send your orders. And each of them is going to depend what is the seller's obligation and what is the buyer's obligation and where the transfer of risk is done. So if you sell something ex works Tunisia, for example, your work is at your factory and they will pick it up and they will do all the paperwork and they are responsible for everything. You're responsible all the way to the door of your factory. But if you choose something that DDP or DAP that is going to be delivered, so you're responsible for everything. So those are the things that you need to negotiate before you starting a shipment or even a negotiation. On the right side, you can see two things there. There is an example of what a bill of lading looks like. Again, this is something that you don't have to do it. It's your streamline who will do it, but it also includes the terms, because if you are having Incoterms like, payment terms like DP at site through the bank, meaning that it's going to be paid to a bank and it gives all the protection to the buyer or the seller. You have a bank as a mediator on the funds. You can have it 30 days, you can have it 60 days, you can have it net 30. The terms are also something that you need to negotiate. Next to it is a blue form, and that's the country of origin certification. That's something that you have to request on your government, and they will have to give it. That will help you with any of the taxes and duties, because you are providing that the product is from Tunisia, is from Kenya, is from Ghana, and that's the tariffs that are going to be incurring, tariffs or duty. It's not a Chinese product, so it's an African product, so you can go through the tariffs or the duty of African, not Chinese. So that's why it's important to have the certificate made by your country. Again, the transportation modes, air, sea, and land. We're talking here with food. So food, it's easier because you will not have hazardous materials. But for example, I buy products that they are food and fragrance, like essential oils, and sometimes there are marine pollutants or they are corrosive. So then I have to send them as a hazardous material. When it's a hazardous materials, I have limited air freight that will take that. So I just have to rely on air and land. From Africa, it would be very difficult to send it to the US via land, so we have to do via sea. Again, we discussed that there are issues right now with the ports. We have had since COVID a big difficulties on freight, and it has been. We're going back to the same prices that we had during COVID. We're almost from Africa. I'm not sure for a whole container load, but from China, we're almost at $20,000 per container load. Normally, it was $2,000-3,000. Now we're at $20,000. Air freight can vary from $3 to $15 per kilo of product shipped. Everything has to be palletized, shrink wrapped for either container or ocean or even truck. On the containers, you don't need to palletize because you can double stack if needed, but upon arrival to the port, it will have to be unloaded, put on pallets, shrink wrapped for freight for land freight. Cold chain logistics is going to be more expensive and limited because, and I know that we are talking with perishable goods, it's going to be more and more difficult in case of, for example, flowers from Ghana, I don't know, or from Kenya. That will have to be a very strict cold chain logistic, and it could be more and more expensive and complicated. On the warehouse and distribution, you can see in the East Coast and the West Coast, there's a lot of warehouses. You can hire a warehouse, you can hire space on a warehouse. It will vary the cost. It could be something between 13 to 50 cents per kilo, depending on what kind of product, what kind of volume you are looking forward to move. And what is very important is that you have to have somebody who can help you in this other side. So you need to find a person who will be able to work with you around, have the warehouse, contract everything. So you will be on good hands because you're not here, right? If you are doing the work by yourself. If you're selling to a supermarket or you're selling to a company, they will take care of things. You don't need a warehouse. You just bring it in. It depends on the Incoterms again. If you're doing SIF New York, it will be there in New York. They pick it up and your responsibility is gone and you just have to get for the payment terms. Next. There's a lot of quality controls and inspection on food. The USDA has the right to go and test and take samples of your food. It's food, so there's a lot of risk. So they have to, they can come and take tests. They can come and do any kind of testing, and that includes pesticides. It can include bio, like bacteria or listeria, everything that can endanger the human consumption. On the other hand, you also have the companies are going to do testing. For example, in my company, when we do with food, we will do testing of pesticides because, for example, chlorpyrifos is banned in the US and it has to have 0%. There's no concentration factors and it has to be 0. So then we have to make sure that the product that we're importing has 0 chlorpyrifos. Chlorpyrifos is a broad pesticide, and it can be also from your neighbor. It doesn't need to be just you, but it could be your neighbor. And then if you find it, it's illegal to have chlorpyrifos. Like this, there are other pesticides that are important as well. We also test for phthalates, for example. We don't want any plastic contamination in the products that we're bringing. And we do testing of the organoleptic, and we do testing of anything, color, and all the physicals like optical rotation and gravity, but those are specific for our products. When you're doing food, every company will have their way of inspecting what they need to be inspecting. Next, you can do the next one. The main challenges that you can have is, okay, like for example, right now, you're shipping something. Let's say that you ship today something that is perishable and is going to hit the port while in a strike, that container is going to sit there until it opens. The boats are going to be in line waiting. If it's one day, it's one day. If it's a week, if it's a month. So everything is going to be stacked, and then your product is going to be ruined. So that's an example. So you have to figure out the ways of strategics and how to mitigate your risk. For example, right now on this case specifically, you should more consider to ship via air, even though it's going to be more expensive, but you will not lose that product. And again, you have to comply, because if, for example, they find something wrong, you ship everything from your country and you bring it to the US. The minute they open it and they find something, they're going to burn it. And you lose that because now it's your product, and you're going to lose the product, and you're going to have penalties, and it will be difficult for you to ship again because you're already on the blacklist. So there's a lot of things about quality, and when we think about it, we need to be always compliant. That's the major risk when we're talking about importing products. The next one. So I can tell you success stories. We've been trying to, right now I'm working specifically with a project in Tunisia, and they are bringing, what had I done? So I've been bringing, first of all, we have been going back and forth, negotiating price, negotiating terms, negotiating payment terms. Then I have worked on all the documentation, I have all the documentation in order. Now I'm going into pre-purchase samples. Those pre-purchase samples are going to be evaluated by the lab, and the lab approve them, then I can work on the shipment. But I want to have all the steps already done. The minute it's approved, then they will have to come and send me a picture of the labels, a picture of the tamper evidence drums, because we want to make sure that nobody tampers with those. So we need tamper evidence. And then finally, they will do the filing and send the bill of lading and send the invoice and the packing list. Once we have all this, we can start with the process of the freight. Once it gets to the freight, it kind of takes 4 to 6 weeks, whatever time it takes. Let's imagine that there's no strike, it goes directly to the customs. Sometimes it takes 1 or 2 days for the container to be unloaded. Then it goes into the customs, and we can wait there up to a week. Once the week is done, all the paperwork has been reviewed, there has been some testing, everything is done, then it will come and we will schedule a pickup at the port. Then it has to come back to our company, and the company, we test the drums, we evaluate the quality again, and once it's all clear, we can organize the payment. So you see, it's a lot of steps, but it happens. And I'm working with Tunisia, I'm working with Morocco in different products. I have worked with Egypt in the past, and there's possibilities. Now the problem is when we find something a problem, we have to return it. And that's on for example, the product that we received did not match what we tested, we have to return. And that is borne by the supplier. You have to take it out of us. We can dispose, we can send it back, but you have to be responsible for that quality that it was not applied. So you can go to all those links and websites. You are not alone when you're doing an export. The airlines or the freight forwarders are going to help you with all that. You will have regulatory advisors and consultants that they can always help you. And of course, trade associations in your countries that they can promote and programs that will really help you. So you're not alone. But what you have to bear in mind is quality. Always bring the best quality, because once you enter and you have some problems, it would be very difficult for you to go back and enter into the customs, into the system. And it would be even more difficult for you to sell to a customer, because quality is going to be the main issue here. If you send one shipment to a buyer that it was not compliant, that has problems, they will never buy from you again. And I can tell you as an experience, as experience, if I get problems on my first shipment, I will never buy from them again. So it's very, very important to maintain quality, transparency, and be compliant with all the regulations. So that's pretty much what we were saying. The US market is going, and it's like the European market, it's all about quality. When we think about food in Africa and Latin America, the regulations are not so strong. But when you go to Europe and the US, there are so many regulations in quality and like colors, pesticides, what is in there, what is in the product, the allergens, all these things. We need to be always putting that first, and then we will be successful in exporting to the US and even Europe.
Thank you very much, Maria Paz. Thank you very, very much for this very interesting presentation. I'm sorry, I forget to ask you to introduce yourself and to introduce your company.
That's okay.
Maybe I should have started with that, but
Sure.
It's not too late.
Okay, so I'm the VP of Purchasing for Berjé Inc. Berjé is it's complicated because it's not only a trader but a producer of ingredients for the food and the fragrance industries. So I deal with all the naturals, like essential oils and natural products of spices. So I work mainly from the north of Africa, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, China. I have more than 15 years of experience in this type of market, and I have implemented the FISMA regulation program. I have done all the regulatory process expectations, for example, and how to go through all the auditing systems in the company.
Thank you very much. Now we can have questions from the participants. So to ask your question, you just have to write in the comments if you are on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube. Just write your questions as a comment, and it will be seen by Maria Paz. But maybe I will ask my friend Luis if you have some questions to start.
I do, Walid, thank you. And keep in mind, many of the companies we are supporting are either exporters for the very first time or have not gone through the whole loop of making it to the US shores successfully or even once. So trying to think like a company that is trying to make it across the ocean, my question is related to what happens in this situation where out of your control, you have containers in Port of Elizabeth or Houston in the south or Miami, and your insurance has to come in. It's a lot of transaction costs to be handling this from Africa and so forth. So maybe if you can tap on your own case studies and share with us what would happen in that situation, that would be good. Thank you.
Okay, first, it's like every insurance. What is the small print, right? If the insurance says that it is out of if a strike is not covered, you are not covered, and you lost it. It's as simple as that. So you need to review your insurance policy on how you're sending it, right? If you're sending it and there's what is the small print? How long it could take for insurance? It could take up to a year to get the money back. It's difficult, and what is most difficult right now is not what you're going to ship from October 1st onwards, because there's a strike, so you make decisions and you say, I'm going to ship via air because it would be easier. It would be overbooked because a lot of people, or I'm going to ship to California and then I'm shipping with a truck. You make those decisions. The challenge right now is the ones that they are on the water, the vessels that they are arriving to the port today or tomorrow. I was working on that this morning, and I have over 300 lines right now that I have to go, and I have to start looking at what is going to hit my inventory and what is going to be bad, and how am I going to mitigate that risk. The ones that I have enough inventory, I will not bother. I will wait until the crisis is gone. But the ones that I need to react right now, how am I going to do? Am I going to bring it via air, and am I going to try a new shipment via California? But to cut to New York is going to be almost 2 weeks late. And of course, that port is going to be overwhelmed. That port is going to be saturated. It might be a month late. So how am I going to manage that? How am I going to manage that with my customers? And how am I going to communicate that with them? So going into the insurance again, I think it depends on each insurance and insurance policy, and how are they going to, what is the small print? I will say that there's no much on strikes, because it's not on their thing. So I think it would be a loss.
So thank you. And connecting the dots, you said that the price for a container from China to the U.S. is back to prices that we saw only during the pandemic.
Correct.
Which should be good news for Africa in case you want to compete. No? Okay.
No, because Africa, okay. If we're talking north of Africa, Tunisia, it's going through the Mediterranean. Tunisia, Morocco, it's coming through the Mediterranean, the Atlantic. It's easy, no problem. But if we're talking about Kenya, now instead of going through Suez, we have to go all the way around. Okay, that's okay. If we start using California instead of New York, we have to go through Panama. And Panama is having a drought. So the port is, the water levels have decreased so much that they can only have, I'm not sure the number, but I think it's like 20 or 24 boats per day that they can cross the canal. So imagine that we're having everything moving towards there, everything that was coming from Africa, everything that was coming from Europe. Now we have to go through Panama, or we can go through Argentina and Patagonia, and that puts 2 more weeks. So if we're doing perishables, that's a different challenge.
So what I'm trying to get to, and thanks for that, is that imagine me as a supplier from, let's say, Nigeria or Ghana. I went to Fancy Food Show. I found a buyer. I am trying to send my first shipment. I have 18 tons in a container. I have 3 cargo agencies in Accra I can negotiate with, but my buyer is suggesting that they can cover the cost. They can pick up the cost of logistics. And by the time the product is in the US, logistics is sometimes a third or even more than a third of the cost of the whole thing. What would you do with the eyes of a buyer? Are you okay with suppliers arranging their own transportation, even though it's a financial burden and sometimes we don't get the best prices? Or is your company more in the practice of picking up the cost of logistics and then deducting that later?
Actually, I think it's the other way around. When you are in the country, you get better rates because you can be doing volumes, you can get with an association, and you can manage better rates. In my experience, I always get worse rates. And I try sometimes, let's say if I'm with all these freight crises, all my purchases have been FOB. We do the negotiation based on FOB. And at the moment of the shipment, we decide what to do. So I have my import team working on a quote, and I compare to the quote that the seller is giving me. If the seller is giving me a better rate, then I change my terms on the contract to CIF or CFR, depending on what I'm doing. If my rate is the best. I leave it FOB and I pick it up at their warehouse. So I think it depends again on how you first of all, how is your relationship with your customer, and that's the most important thing. Build a relationship, because when you are building a relationship based in trust, on trust, you can really work together, and that's for the benefit of both companies.
And just to finish with this series of questions on logistics, I will ask you to hold nothing back in your response. But if I'm supplying something and I fail on complying with one document or one standard, what kind of consideration do I get from your side? Is it like you fail to comply? It's all your loss? Is it possible to negotiate what can be rescued from that cargo? I know, as a friend of mine used to say, business have no scruples, but we're talking about companies that maybe 50% of their capital went into a full container. So what kind of humanity we can expect from the other end of the table when it comes to the learning process, because some mistakes are bound to happen sometimes. So what's your experience of that?
Unfortunately, there's none. You comply or you don't comply, and that's it. That's exactly what I was mentioning before, is your relationship, how you have worked that relationship, because mistakes can happen. So also the buyer has to do the diligence, they have to do all the work before. So if they don't have all the documentation, why are they asking them to ship? So it's both sides, okay? But if it's a compliance, okay, they didn't file the FCA, that's a problem. The ISF, that's a problem, because that is going to be passed to the seller. If they didn't send it and they don't comply with it, it's going to be passed to them. If the container gets delayed at customs and they find something and it cannot get in, that's on the seller. And again, it will all depend on how it was negotiated, right? If it was negotiated FOB of the warehouse, then the buyer is responsible 100% of everything.
Right.
But because he will be, as the importer, he will be the importer. But if you are doing CFR, CIF, DAP, then you're bearing the responsibility all the way to the door of the company.
Right.
And unfortunately, those things happen. And it is very costly. I'm returning right now 100 kilos back to Morocco of a product that came in, did not get approved, and we are returning. It's taking us 6 months. So we haven't paid them, of course, because the product was not accepted. And they have to work on the return. They haven't been able to find the paperwork to return. So it's a product that costs around $15,000 per kilo.
Right.
It's not a $5 kilo. It's a $15,000 per kilo. So we have 100 kilos. It's almost $1 million. They haven't received the money, and we have to figure out how to return it, and we cannot return it.
Yeah.
So it is very complicated. It will depend on how you're negotiating your terms, and also how you're building that relationship. But believe me, there's no sympathy. It's business is business, and when you fail once, you don't get another chance. That's how cutthroat it is.
Thank you.
An open door again in that place.
Thank you. I said that was my last question, but I think there is one more that might be useful for our supported companies to hear. In the trade show, some people showed up. They saw the product, they saw the labeling, they made some comments. That was very useful feedback. Hopefully, most of our products were pretty good. But there are buyers that didn't show up, and sometimes they say, "Oh, send me samples." But the truth of the matter is that for a small company to send samples, you're talking about a very expensive air shipment. And I'm going to say, to send 3 cans or 3 jars is going to be in the $150 to $300 ratio. And sometimes buyers don't even acknowledge they got the sample, don't do anything with it. So I got into practice years ago of suggesting our companies samples should be paid by half and half by the buyer. And I see your head nodding. But from Peru 2 years ago, we had a frozen foods company, and this guy wanted a sample. It took us $900 to send a frozen food sample, and the guy never responded to our emails or calls. Did he like the sample? Did he look at it? So I feel that by the buyer chipping in at least part of the cost of the sample, there is more of a commitment to discuss the deal.
No.
But I want to hear
You
your
close the door. If you ask a buyer pay half of it or pay for the sample, the buyer will simply respond, "Thank you very much, I'm not interested," and the door is closed. You will never be able to go back there.
Okay.
Samples is the cost of doing business. You want to sell, you have to be able to provide those samples. I know it's expensive. There are mechanisms for you to get in a better place. So, for example, in my case, I will say as a buyer, if I'm not 100% interested in a sample, I will say, why don't you send me the C of A? Can you send me a C of A, the certificate of analysis of the product? Can you send me a chromatogram? I want to see the chromatogram. I want to see what peaks it has. If I see something interesting, I might request a sample.
And pay for it.
No,
Ah.
no, it's the cost of doing business. So probably I'm paying for it in the cost of the product at the end, probably.
Right.
But I will not pay. I will not give my FedEx account to any of my buyers and any of my clients. You want me to see your product, you send me your product. I, as a responsible buyer, I will acknowledge when I receive a sample, and I will tell them, listen, if it takes some time for me, the priority is for the products that I'm buying. If I have a product that I'm not buying right now, but it's just a sample that they sent, it might take 3 weeks, but I will respond. Sorry, it will take 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, I will give you the results. But I will say right away, I'm not interested or I'm interested. And in 3 weeks, I will say, yes, your product passed. Hopefully next time when I'm in the market, I will contact you. And if you are blah, 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 we can do it. But not all the buyers are like this. My company, we are like this. We acknowledge receipt and we give results, good or bad. We don't share the results. Like I will not send a file, but I will acknowledge what is the differences. I will try to work with them if I'm interested. In the food industry, it's going to be a little bit more complicated because you just want to send it across and see if it. So it's unfortunately the cost that it has to be bare in order to make business, and that's the question that we want to do. Do we want to do an export business, or we prefer to do a local business and then expand, or should I export to a closer country where I can? And again, everything goes back to the relationship. So becoming part of that network is very important because I receive samples that I have never asked, and literally I do not do anything with it. If I haven't asked for it and they send me random samples, I don't know who they are, what they are doing. It just sits there, and 3 months later they just go to the trash. As simple as that. So it's a relationship, it's communication, it's building a stronger partnership and the need for each other. And that's what is important. They need to need each other. Because if not, again, it's lost, it's just lost in the air.
Well, thank you very much. I think those are valuable insights. Kind of a reality check, really.
I'm sorry.
Walid, back to you.
We cannot hear you.
Walid, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Maria Paz. So we have a question from Nisoa Rak. could you share with us the presentation? Yes, we can share it. You just have to send to us by private message your email address, and we will share with you the presentation. Thanks again, Maria Paz, for your presentation. Just before closing this webinar, I want to inform the participants about the coming buyers mission we are organizing in North Africa that will start with Algeria on the 9th and 10th of November, then Tunisia 12 and 13, and Morocco 14 and 15 of November. So we will have many activities, visits to suppliers, and also for the buyers who doesn't know the North Africa, visits of the three countries, and I would say an experience plus the business that will be done. So you are welcome to ask us to participate, and we'll be happy to provide you all the information about the buyer's mission. So if we don't have additional questions, I will thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much, Luis, for the facilitation. Thank you, Maria Paz, for your presentation, and thank you very much for all the participants to this webinar for attending and getting information about logistics to export to the US markets. So see you very soon. Thank you very much. Bye.